Hi and welcome. I'm Lisa. Thanks for joining me here on the Imagine Crafts YouTube channel today. In this video, I'm sharing how to use stencils along with a few inks to create gorgeous backgrounds wrapped in vellum and heat embossed with your favorite inspirational quote. I've used the background in two ways to create a handmade card and framed one. Here's a quick look at a few of the products I'll be using throughout the video. VersaMagic ink in the colors Tea Leaves and Hint of Pesto, Delicata Golden Glitz ink, VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and Clear Mboss embossing powder. You will need a stencil, blender brushes or ink daubers, and some vellum and cardstock. Now I'm using 110-pound cardstock, and I've cut it to 5.5 by 5.5 inches. And I'm using this Farmhouse Greenery stencil, but you can use any stencil that you have available to you. And I'm just going to hold that in place with a little bit of washi tape. So I'm going to take my blender brush and I'm going to add a small amount of the VersaMagic tea leaves to the brush. So before applying this to the stencil, I like to remove a little of the ink onto my craft mat. Now I'm using a light hand and I'm going to apply the ink in random areas. I'm going to repeat those same steps with the Hint of Pesto VersaMagic ink. Again, I'm being very random with this application. So when I get ready to move into my next color, which is going to be the Golden Glitz, I want to use a clean blender brush. I don't want to contaminate my Golden Glitz ink pad with the VersaMagic ink. So I'm going to go ahead and pick some of this ink up and lay it down on my craft mat. You can see how beautiful that ink is. And I'm going to fill in the empty space that's left. So as I remove a little of that ink onto my craft mat and go ahead and start blending that in with the light hand, you'll notice I come back to the craft mat and pick that ink up and then go back to the stencil. So once I've finished with the golden, I just go back in with the green and soften out the edges. And here's our end result. Now I did do another stencil background exactly the same, just to save a little bit of time. So I'm going to use a stamp positioning tool to stamp this quote. Now I'm going to lay a piece of vellum into my stamping tool, and you want the vellum to be long enough to fold the ends behind the stenciled panel. Now you can skip this part completely and you could use a VersaMarker pen if you're into maybe like hand lettering or you like your penmanship. So you could just take this VersaMarker pen, write your quote out onto the vellum and then put your embossing powder on it, black embossing powder, and you would be set to go. But I'm going to stick with stamping and then heat embossing. So I've laid down anti-static powder on the vellum and I'm going to use this VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink to stamp the quotes. Now this is a pigment ink and it's perfect for heat embossing. And just so you know, I go ahead and I stamp both of the sentiments before adding the Mboss embossing powder, and you have enough time when you use this VersaFine Clair ink to stamp 2 or 3 sentiments or quotes and then do all of your heat embossing at one time. So when you're stamping, you don't want to push down hard on your stamp because when you do, it causes your stamp to spread out and that's going to cause your ink to mushroom. So always use a light hand when you're stamping and also when you're applying the ink. So I'm going to go ahead and add my clear embossing powder. Now before I take the heat to the vellum, I want to let it heat up. And you want the powder to start melting right away to avoid warping this vellum. The less time the heat is in contact with that vellum, the less warping you will have. And you'll know when it's melted because it becomes shiny and dimensional. So here's a quick look at the background and quote together. I think it's so pretty. The vellum just softens everything up. So for my card, I'm going to go ahead and trim down the edges of this panel here. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my mini scoreboard to score lines so I can fold that vellum behind the panel. Now, if you don't have a scoreboard, don't worry. You can just use your fingers to do that. So I went ahead and cut a 5.5 inch by 5.5 inch piece of 110-pound cardstock to create a card base. And I've also cut a dark green mat, and that is cut to about 5¼ by 5¼ And now I'm using tear it tape to apply to the back of the green mat. I'm going to remove the paper backing and center it on the card base. And I'm using that same tear it tape to hold the vellum in place and adhere the stenciled panel to the card. So here's a look at our finished card. Now you could go in if you wanted to and add embellishments, but I thought that it was fine on its own. The vellum to me is such a beautiful addition to handmade cards and decor because it softens things up, but still you can see your design through it. So I'm just using a very inexpensive frame to go ahead and frame that second panel and that sentiment. Now, this would make a great gift for someone where you have a inspirational quote framed and then you have a matching card. So that's pretty neat. Okay, so I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed joining me and that you were inspired enough to head into your crafty space and create something amazing today. I do hope you'll hit the subscribe button and click the bell to be notified of new content to the channel. And if you could hit the like button, that would be awesome. I want to encourage you to leave any comments or suggestions below. As always, know we appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. And until next time, keep crafting.